What's up? In this lesson, we are going to do a little tour of the settings that you have inside of the Aziel Arts landscape material, and I'll give a little bit of an explanation for what each of them do, and in future lessons, we'll go ahead and apply them to making some completely new materials. So I'm going to go ahead and open the material instance that's currently applied to this landscape in the example map. So I'll go ahead and open that and put it up to the side here. Okay, so the way that the material is organized is by category of things that you might want to change in the material. The first thing that we usually do when we set up a material is come up to the layer setup and choose some of the features that we want to be on or off for this particular material. You can see we have turning on the actual landscape grass, which is the grass that's automatically spawned in the grassy areas. So we can turn that on and off. We can also choose to either use just the standard auto material functions of the material or introduce additional auto material based landscape layers, which we can paint or drive by texture maps. So if we wanted to go ahead and turn on paint layers, we could go ahead and click that on, and this would allow us to turn on any number of landscape paint layers, which we could then go and start painting on our landscape. And you can see by default it will be black because we need to go ahead and set up our actual landscape layers for this landscape, which we'll go ahead and do in a future lesson. So I will go ahead and turn that off. We also have the option to either use slope related masking. So these rocks are being masked by slope in areas that are more at an angle or more steep. They are switching to the rock material. That's how it looks so natural like this. But if I want it just to be one material over everything, I could go ahead and turn those slope mask layers off. I can also turn on or off my snow layer or puddles and using a separate far texture. So the far texture is this texture in the distance. If you want to gradually blend between the actual materials you have on your landscape and a satellite texture or a texture from Gaia, an overall texture of your landscape, you can do that using this function. All right, so that's the very important to just jump into first when you're making a material is the layer setup. Then we have our general categories that you're probably familiar with. We have our base color controls for each layer, which include color variation over the landscape. We have roughness controls as well as normal map controls, and height controls are where we control the displacement in our landscape material, which also controls the blending between layers because we're using the height map information to more naturally blend between landscape layers. So we can control the intensity of our displacement here as well. We also have our distance and slope blending. This material has two versions of textures, one that are for close-up and one that are far in the distance. And they have two different sizes of UVs, which helps break up textures and helps the distant textures look more realistic. And so you can control the distance blending feature here, as well as the slope blending here. So if we wanted to go ahead and adjust the slope blending for our rocks here, we could go ahead and adjust the fall off power here, which would control the kind of intensity of the slope blending. We also have our texture size, which is related to the size of our textures that we've plugged into our material. We have texture breakup. Now texture breakup is really cool. It's actually using a type of texture bombing, which is a lot lighter than the texture bombing that comes with Unreal Engine. It's basically taking your textures and rearranging them and kind of scrambling them. And so if you turn this on for either close or far textures, again, either the textures that you see close up or the textures that you see in the distance, that will really help with texture breakup and helping things not look like they're repeating so much. We also have our puddle or ice layer, our snow layer, which is active up here. You can see we can control the height of our snow and a bunch of other features about it. And then we have our texture input section here. Now this is going to expand or contract depending on what you choose up here in your layer setup. For example, if we enable multiple paint layers, this will go ahead and show multiple paint layer inputs for not just layer 1, but layer 2, layer 3, and we'll go ahead and cover that in a future lesson. But this is where we're going to add in our variation, our color variation texture, our separate far texture if we're using that, again, the satellite photo that it blends to when we go in the distance, and as well as all of our normal textures for the rocks or the grass. Finally, if you decide to use landscape grass here, which is spawning these rocks and grass automatically using the grass layer, you can come over here to the ground cover section and enable rocks or grass on various landscape layers that you're using. So you can see all of these settings are not necessarily related to rocks or grass. They're general settings because I want this material to be as adaptable as possible to your needs. So you can use it to create a grassland wasteland, a snowy mountaintop. You can use it to create a fantasy landscape with fantasy texture inputs. It's really all driven by the texture inputs that you put in here and how you choose to blend them together. So very adaptable, and in the future lessons we'll expand upon that and how to make more custom materials. All right, I'll see you in the next one.